The Pin Drop podcast brings you the most intrepid chat on the podsphere. Interesting people sharing their personal formula for success, stories of personal growth, people confessing their fears and what they have learned from going to the edge. Hosted by me, Vicki Tom, founder of We Are Intrepid. We Are Intrepid is a personal growth philosophy and an adventure experience company. Our sole purpose is to show you how to experience the truly life-enhancing effects of advantage through adversity, to understand how our fears and emotions work, and how to unlock the huge potential we all have to lead a more fulfilling and rewarding life. And maybe for you, that starts with listening to this.
I am so excited to welcome Tom Otton to the podcast today. I was lucky enough to meet Tom in the Arctic, of all places, where we both undertook an ultra marathon of, well, it was billed as 230 kilometers. I think it was closer to 250 by the time we'd finished. But Tom was a lot faster than I was, always finished a good few hours before me, and was up early each morning with a big smile on his face, ready to take on the next day. I took a huge amount of inspiration from his attitude and his whole approach to that ultra marathon. But there's a lot more to Tom besides his ultra running, and I can see that you're joining us today from your agency in Dubai called Create. You're the CEO of a digital marketing agency, is that correct? Tell me from, in your own words, Tom, introduce yourself.
Sure. Well, look, firstly, thank you very much. And I think the first conversation we had was over an extra large pizza. I remember that conversation whilst we were just shoveling as many calories in as we could before we stumbled out into the snow. And I think you're right. We probably did about 250k after getting lost a few times and going off going off course. But it was it was a pretty epic experience, the Ice Ultra, which I'm sure we're going to get into in a bit, and obviously meeting you. So I'm really glad we've been able to reconnect and not just comments over social media, and actually have a conversation again, which is awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah, look, it's thanks a lot for inviting me on the podcast. I am joining you from Dubai. I run a strategic digital comms agency that's spread across the Middle East. So we've got 200 people across 3 offices in Cairo, Riyadh, and HQ in Dubai. I started the agency around 12 years ago, a little over that, and just been hustling it from a single desk to where we are today. And yeah, I'm fortunate to have some amazing people working in the agency. I'm very fortunate to really enjoy what I do. I enjoy building the community that we have here, and just trying to do the best that we can every day from a work standpoint. But the thing that really drives me is definitely the community and just trying to create the right environment.
And the culture, so I mean, I don't know how you find time for it, honestly, Tom, running a business of that size and success, level of success, but you're also a pretty hardened ultra runner, aren't you? You've done a good few endeavors, challenges in your time.
Yeah, I've been fortunate again to have squeezed out enough time here and there to be able to go on some of these adventures, but I think both of them are very much interlinked. It's not that I'm lucky enough to be successful from a work standpoint with the business. It's actually because of the ultra running, and I put it down to, if I actually map when I got into this space, how my mindset changed after I did the first Marathon des Sables, how that affected me, how I thought about everything, how I thought about what was real versus perceived problems, how I dealt with difficult situations, how I became a lot more humble, because as you know, you have to when you're running ultras, because the first sign of an ego, that race will slap you around the face and tell you you're worthless quite quickly. So all of those lessons learned through going through endurance is very much played out in how I've engaged with work and people. And I think it's not a coincidence that as I started on the bigger races, business started to go in our direction. We started to operate differently, think a bit differently, and that's where we found, fortunately, being able to find some success. So from a running standpoint, the first big one was a complete failure. which was 80k through the Brecon Beacons, and I
That, to
fell
be
to
fair, I mean,
pieces.
the Arctic was one thing, but the Brecon Beacons that can be pretty hardcore, right?
Yeah, it can be. It wasn't that hardcore. It was just I was very soft when I did that race, and it didn't go well. But it was one of those things where it was a huge step back for me, that actually then put me on the right path, because I came back from that race having broken physically, which is just, I hadn't trained. I didn't know how to train for an ultra at that point, but mentally broke, was whinging about stuff, complaining about things, was just weak in every sense of the word. And then it was the kind of the internal shame that I had of how that had gone that drove me on to, right, I need to sign up for something bigger, and I need to do well. And, I have to risk everything to kind of, I suppose, get my my own not self-worth back, but certainly self-respect back, I would say, after that first performance. So that was that ended up being the MDS Marathon des Sables across the Sahara, the 250k, and that went well.
That's a pretty big step up there, Tom. From
in
your own words, I'm sure it wasn't
yeah.
entirely failed, your Brecon Beacons ultra, but and if to use your own words, to go from a failed 80k ultra to the Marathon des Sables in quite different conditions.
Yeah, it was, but sometimes that's the best way. It's, you have to scare yourself into taking massive action, right? And I knew that if it was another kind of thing, kind of similar, would that drive the change of behavior I was looking for? It wasn't necessarily just a performance, but obviously, it's process that leads to performance, and it was the complete change of behavior that I needed, and I knew that if I signed up for something that would drive that behavioral change, I would get the results I was looking for, and that, fortunately, it worked out. So
no, I mean,
took things from there.
Yeah, I actually was having a conversation along exactly those lines with someone yesterday about setting yourself really crazy, hairy, audacious goals in life, because that is what brings about the behavioral changes right now. If you're aiming for something that is kind of vaguely achievable, it's probably not a big enough goal, right? And even if you don't achieve that massive goal, you're still having to change your behaviors right now in order to even consider that you could.
Yeah, look, I've very much subscribed to that. My view on it is that if you shouldn't be able to achieve it until you become the person that can achieve that. So it's through that process of change, like you sign up for it now and you're like, wow, I could not do that today. So you're forced into doing certain things, whether that's mental, physical, both. Yeah, you kind of scare yourself into it. It's been a good tactic for me. I mean, it's not the only way of doing things, but it's worked for me. So I'm happy with it.
Yeah. And then from the Marathon des Sables, you went to the Arctic?
No, so did from there was the second MDS in Peru. So the first time they ran that race, actually, and that was a shit show. It was not for me, but for the race themselves. Yeah, it was a complete mess. Without getting into too much detail, but there was, I think, a 38% dropout rate of that race.
Wow.
I'll give you one example that is a summation of all the problems that happened on that race. The water that they gave us, and obviously, as you well know, this is highly rationed water. The water they gave us was fizzy.
Oh my God.
So you can imagine when you're filling up your water bottles on the front and you're putting your sachets in them, they're all fizzing out of the bottles because you start to run. So they gave us carbonated water to run 250k. So you had people like peeing blood because it was destroying their system so bad. And then when you make the food, you rip those silver foil bags.
And then you end up with a volcano.
Yeah, imagine heating fizzy, and it's got slightly sulfuric. So
you
heat that up, and it's not great. And then you put it into one of those meals that are not great. And imagine trying to eat that. It's fizzing in your mouth. You're eating spag bol, and it's fizzing in your mouth. And it was So just to give you an idea, the army was supposed to be supporting them, and apparently walked out on day 4 because they hadn't been paid. So they refused to set the tents up on one of the camps like this.
And so
it was like the fire festival.
Forgive my fire festival. Amazing. Forgive my ignorance then. Do they still run
Yeah.
that race in Peru? No. Was it just a
So
one-off, a test?
I think they do. I think they did
That
a
went
half
bad.
NDS. Yeah, I think one year it didn't happen afterwards, and then they did something, but it wasn't the full one. I'm not sure where they're at with it now.
All right.
But yeah, there
But you
was.
wouldn't recommend it.
No, do not go to Peru to do the MDS. Is all I'm saying. But that aside, look, we were there for a challenge, and they gave us one.
Yeah.
It was it was beautiful in Peru, amazing to travel across the Ica Desert. That was again 250k, same format across the 5 days, and really enjoyed that. It was I did that with a friend of mine who wasn't an ultra runner, and yeah, a very different race for me.
Yeah.
That I did with him, but I got just as much out of it than working with him to see him achieve what he wanted to do. I got just as much from that as just trying to hammer myself in a race. So it was different, but it was very rewarding as well.
And then we were in the Arctic eating pizza.
Yeah, that was that was a good one. There was another one in between, which was the UTMB. The 137 kilometers across the Hajar Mountains in Oman, and that was single stage.
Wow.
So that was.
So how long were you
most,
awake for?
I was awake for 56 hours.
Oh my god!
And I was on the course for 42 hours because I was pretty slow because I'd injured my calf, which slowed me right down. So it was a slog fest just to get through it.
And how did you find the sleep deprivation?
Full hallucinations. Started talking to myself, talking to rocks, thinking trees were people. We started at 7 p.m. You see, so you go through the night, which is fine.
Yeah.
You get through to the next morning, your body starts to think, what's going on? The sun's now coming up, it's still cracking on. You're getting sunburnt in the middle of the day, and then you go into the second night. It drops down to like 7 degrees, and it was from sunburn during the day to cold and windy at night. Second night was complete hallucinations. There was a 50+% dropout rate on the race, so was completely on my own for at least 4 or 5 hours on the second night. Didn't see another human. Just thought I was kind of lost at different points. It was it was an experience, and obviously being awake for that period of time is.
Was it safe terrain? Were you kind of nervous or anxious about being on your own in that environment or in the dark?
It was. So there's one particular point which was kind of I'd say the climax of that race was after 120 kilometers. I came into an aid station. Had some soup. It was really cold considering the time of year. That aid station was at the bottom of a valley, and then it went up 1.3 kilometers over a 3.5 kilometer distance. So, not vertical, but you're not too far off. It was a real scramble up. So at that point, it was like poles were in the bag, and it was a full scramble. And there was one point where I was shimmying around a rock. Now, if you think like from a climbing standpoint, you've got both hands on this kind of rock surface, and you're shimmying around it along a 0.5 meter, 0.75 of a meter kind of path that kind of edges around this rock face, and you think kind of like going around a boulder. Behind it was a 600-meter drop into darkness, and all I could see was the lights of the camp that I'd come from, like way down to the bottom of the valley. And I was shimmying around this thing, and I'm thinking, I've been awake for God knows how long at this point. There's no safety here whatsoever. There's no people. There's no lights. There's nobody. It's freezing cold. I've got 120 kilometers in my legs already, and there's no one here. And I'm shimmying around a rock face. Like if I stepped backwards or lost balance, like no one would even know until like the morning.
Tom, tell me when you're in that kind of situation, because I have been in similar situations myself where there's no one to help you, and your life literally is in the hands of the gods, pretty much. Well, in your own hands, and then everything after that is a bit of a gamble. I found that, because I obviously did the SAS Who Dares Wins program, which was pretty sketchy at times, but you always had that kind of rational thought that, well, I kind of couldn't be in safer hands because there are these 4 guys with like 80 years of SAS experience behind them. So however sketchy it got, there was always that. On an ocean in the middle of a night, in the middle of a storm, when you kind of are just getting to grips with what you're doing, seasick, and all the rest of it, and exhausted and sleep deprived, It's a pretty terrifying experience. And I'll often get people ask me about that and say, you know, were you not absolutely gripped with fear? But the truth is, when you are in that situation and you only have yourself to rely on, you're capable of dealing with so much more than you ever would give yourself credit for in everyday life. Would you agree? How did you
Yeah,
adapt
yeah.
to that
I would say
situation?
it's interesting. You almost you need to get to that place to realize how capable you are, because you can
Mm.
think it, you can talk it, but until you're actually, you know, your back's against the wall and whatever that means, you don't really know how you will react and what you're actually capable of doing. And interesting to your point, when you are, and I've not been on a very small rowboat in the middle of the ocean,
I wouldn't recommend
in
it.
the middle of the night. No, I mean, funny. Most people that have done it say that they wouldn't recommend it. And from the videos, I don't think I'll do that one. But to your point, when you're in a position where there is only yourself to get yourself out of whatever problem you're in, what I find is that the fear is definitely there, and I think this concept of like fearlessness is not true. Everybody is fearful of certain things at certain times in certain ways, and sometimes it shows up when you're not expecting it, or you think you're experienced in something, and all of a sudden, woof, like a
Yeah.
wave of fear comes over you and it grips you. And I think the difference is understanding that that is perfectly natural, and that isn't a sign of weakness, or it's not even a sign of a lack of preparedness. It's just, this is the human body trying to protect itself,
Yeah.
and you need to understand it as such, and then also work with it, because fear is one, I suppose it's one symptom of what is actually happening in your body, which is everything is being turned on. Everything is, all the lights are on, and every sense is, you got electricity going through your body. Now you can use that to completely lose your mind and be fearful and not be able to do anything. Or if you can control that, you know, right, I need to do a certain thing here. Let's just focus on that and focus. In my mind, what I do if I'm ever in that situation is try and close the field of view down to the only the thing that I can control and only the thing that I need to do. And I know that if I do that as well as I possibly can, I'm putting myself in the best possible position for the outcome to be great. If I don't get this right, the outcome is not great, full stop.
Mm.
If I get it right, the outcome might still not be great, because something else could happen that is not within my control. But if we worry about those things, then we're never going to move. So I try and really kind of almost go internal into I'll give you an example. When I was going over the mountain, we'll probably get to the story in a bit, in the Arctic, I went within myself to the point where I used this example the other day. Have you seen Men in Black, when they open up the head of, I can't remember what alien it is, and there's a little dude there with levers, and
Yeah.
he's controlling the body?
Yeah.
That's, I had this image in my head where I was actually inside myself controlling the shell that was my being, and I was talking to myself as if I was protected inside my own body.
And
And I was like,
these were your hallucinations, clearly.
these are my hallucinations. And I was like, this is what you need to do next. And I just really, really, really focused on just those things that I could control, and just the things that I had to do within the next 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, not what I needed to do over the next 100 kilometers or anything like that. And if you break it down into those bite-sized pieces, everything becomes more manageable, and you have a lot more control, because fear is generally a lack of control. Something's going to happen to me and I can't control it, therefore I'm fearful. But if you try and remove that, you can often find a way through.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that one of the things that I'm forever trying to encourage others to do, not necessarily to row oceans or do, you know, crazy, really extreme things, but to push yourself into your an area of discomfort in your life, is the only way really that you're going to create those sort of forcing mechanisms to understand that that's how your brain can work in situations, you know, that require it. And then of course you can apply that back to everyday life. It's such a useful
Yeah.
technique and you know, strategy to apply back to any situation where you're under stress. Doesn't need to be a physical stress or an immediate danger or fear.
Absolutely. I think before we become a bit learned in that space, and before, I mean, the instant reaction is pure fear. I can't do anything about it. The worst case scenario is going to happen, and you throw your hands up in the air and that you can't take action, right? And we've probably all been there. I've certainly been there. So earlier stages of like, that something comes over you and you're almost paralyzed with fear, right? The reason why that's such a
Yeah.
common phrase is because that's actually what happens. You're just like,
Yeah.
I can't move because I don't know what to do. If I take what you just said there and apply it to work, for example, things happen all the time when you're building a business. Like, stuff happens all the time that could potentially be catastrophic to your organization or your growth or your plans or whatever it might be. A big client leaves you and you've got a whole bunch of people allocated to that account, or a few things go sideways, or the COVID happens, or certain things that were within your control, but quite often, mostly it's outside of your control. These things happen, but you then have to react. The examples that you said, if you put yourself into these seeking out discomfort and finding these very difficult scenarios where you can train your mind to behave in a certain way, you then start to play that out in the workspace where you're like, right, this could be really bad, but let's just focus on what we can do about it right now. So you bring your team together and you're like, right, what can you do over the next 48 hours you think can positively impact this? And you go around the room. The chances are around the team that you have, plus yourself, plus the fact that the worst case scenario probably won't play out, you can normally get yourself out of pretty much any situation. But if you lose your mind and you just think, oh, I'm closing my laptop, I'm going home, the whole thing's done, then chances are at some point it will be.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And it's just all about perspective, isn't it? And I think once you've experienced different perspectives in life that are potentially for you, whatever extreme means for you, then that just allows you to readjust your view of the world and any given situation. Do you feel like you I'm interested whether you undertake these challenges as a sort of structure or discipline in order to benefit your career and your company, or do you do them purely for enjoyment, and they just happen to have that kind of carryover effect? Are you
Interesting question
of how you make those decisions, or whether you do?
Yeah. I mean, look, interesting question, because it's I think I know the answer is both, right? And what I mean by that is that we know life is going to be difficult. Everyone's life is difficult at different times. We all go through things that are unexpected. We all have to deal with tough times and environments. If you choose to do what I do, which is building a business and taking on the responsibility of 200 people's careers and their dependents, all of their lives, their communities that they're supporting, all those sorts of things, I guarantee that my day-to-day is difficult, because I'm creating an environment where it is difficult, because if I choose to take on that responsibility and there are that many variables, things will continue to go wrong. So I know that I'm creating an environment that will cause stress, that will cause discomfort, that will cause potentially a lot of sleepless nights. So when I look at that and I try and look at this objectively, I think, well, what can I do to try and make myself as resilient as possible, as bulletproof as possible, as calm as possible, as balanced as possible? And it's all of these things, right? Whether it's meditation, whether it's breathing, like those are the easier things, the kind of the low-hanging fruit. But beyond that is very much seeking out discomfort to the point where it creates resilience and creates a different mindset. And I said that I don't know which one came first, but certainly when I started to do the longer runs like the MDS and I saw the benefit in business, I've kind of doubled down on that. I don't know if I did one because of the other or vice versa, but because I saw that system working, I was like, A, I really enjoy going on adventures and it's my escape. So it's just pure escapism. But secondly, I come back a stronger, more balanced person. And therefore, sometimes when I'm sat in the boardroom and all hell is breaking loose, and I'm like, yeah, but it's not as difficult as crossing that bloody mountain.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really as important as we're making it out to be. Yeah.
I know
Absolutely.
that, right? If you're, for you, life and death on a rowboat, and that really is serious versus something that might happen in life, and you're like, yeah, this is difficult, it's inconvenient, it's not what I wanted, but like there's no question of survival with this. In a few weeks I'll be over it. So
it is important not to undermine anyone's sort of situation and what may seem to be of utmost importance to any individual. But I just think, I know that in terms of, you undertaking the kinds of endeavors that you do, it's not just for your own enjoyment or even just further your career and your business interests, but you want to inspire other people to also get a taste of that for themselves, because you know what difference it's made in your own life.
Absolutely. And look, I'd say to your point, it's not undermining different people's perspectives of their own difficulties. I think all it is perspective.
Yeah.
And every single person is guilty of this. Both of us are 100%, like every human is, right? You think the problem that's facing you is the worst problem. It's the most difficult problem. But if I asked you what was the biggest problem that you had in June of last year, you probably can't even answer that question, right? Because even though it was super important at the time, like when you look back on it, you're like, yeah, it wasn't that important. I worked through that, and it was just one of the things that happened, you know. So all I'm saying is, when someone's facing it, you can either get lost in how deep that problem could potentially be, or how emotionally attached to it that you are, or you can try and be a little bit more objective. And the ultra stuff and the endurance stuff, all it does is gives you a little bit more perspective. It allows you to take that step back, and you say, I still feel the way that I feel about this particular situation I'm dealing with, but it just gives you the voice in the back of your head telling you that it's not as bad as it could be, or as you probably think it is, and in a few weeks it's probably not even going to register on your radar anymore. So it's just a mindset shift, not necessarily undermining what that particular problem is.
And also, you know, sometimes seeing those problems as actually essential markers in your life that have led you on to other things. There's that statistic, isn't there? I think it's like 98% of people, if you ask them, would they like to erase any of the hardships that they've encountered in their life to date, 98% of people would say no, because they've led them on to.
That's amazing.
It's a great statistic, isn't it? Tom, let's compare notes about the Arctic then, because I think we had slightly different experiences. My days were like 18 hours, getting in at 1 a.m, getting 4 hours sleep.
That was intense.
I was categorically not running in my snowshoes. You absolutely smashed it. Tell me about that experience for you.
No, I don't think that, as with all of these ultras, I don't think that there is an easier way to do them. Anybody that gets across that line has put in the same amount of work, just it played out in a different way. Like, you can push your body harder with a run and have a really tough time doing that, or you can take a whole bunch more time to do it and have a really tough time doing that as well. So it's look, hats off to you to do the hours that you did. Like I look at that and be like, could I have gone through the dark in the way that you did? I mean, the temperatures really dropped after I finished. So I'm looking out the window. I'm like, Jesus, it's really
do you remember there was one night when there was an absolutely brutal blizzard? And we were on a long
the
flat.
lake. It was the lakes. It was the lakes.
And I remember us having a conversation like the following morning where you were like, you were looking out of the window, and bear in mind, we were staying in these little huts that had no amenities, did they? There was no running water, there were no toilets.
It's a wooden shack.
It was a wooden shack, and you had to light your own stove fire and keep it going, and there was no electricity. We were using torchlight, weren't we, to work, to undress, to sort our kit out, to try to eat something. And I do remember you saying the following morning that you had watched our tiny little headlamp dots
for a long time.
For a really long time from your tiny little hut window.
I mean, for context for the listeners, the best way to think about this, imagine a lake that is somewhere in the region of about 15 kilometers long. God knows how wide it was, but we got onto one end of the lake and it just went straight. So you can't see the other end of the lake, obviously, and you just keep going and going and going and going until, obviously, once it gets dark, you can start to see some of the lights right on the far side.
Which were also completely misleading, because you had a totally false view of how close they were to you.
And the problem was there was a checkpoint about halfway, I would say, across, and I thought that checkpoint was the end. And then you get to that tent with the solitary light by it, and you realize that you've got to do all of that again. So that was pretty bad. So I got in just before sunset, and we were in a little wooden shack that was kind of closest to, let's say, what would have been the water's edge. And there was a little kind of broken pane glass window. This is real outback. So just try and paint the picture. This is real outback wooden shack. And when we say stoves and stuff, there was no kitchen in this thing. It's like the smallest little wood burner that you've ever seen, and that's it in a corner of a wooden shack. And you're trying to scrape your matches together to get this lit. But anyway, once we were kind of warmed up, and I was looking out, and I could just see these two torches in the distance. I was like, "Wow, they are miles away." And I watched you for hours. Yeah, hours. And I just thought that, I mean, that was when the blizzard came in as well. So it was, well, certainly the wind. I mean, it was.
I mean, we could barely stand up. We were leaning into the wind to stay upright. It was crazy.
I can only because I was in kind of like the edge of a forest, right? So we had some trees around us whilst we were in this wooden shack. And I remember looking at those lights and just, wow, you were out there for hours. And I remember saying to the boys as well that were with me in there, and I was just like, I don't know what's more difficult, like hammering yourself running or being outside in that, because it was savage. You know, the two of you did an incredible job.
Well, I mean, you smashed it. Did you come in third place overall, didn't you?
No, fifth actually. Fifth place. Yeah.
I mean, but there was some serious athletes in that race, weren't there?
There was, and you know, one of the things I looked at, because as you know, none of us had done anything like that before, right? It's such a unique race.
Well, to be fair, some people had.
Well, had they? So, there was a couple of people that had returned, hadn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I think most of the people that I'd spoken to certainly didn't know what was coming, right? So, when I was kind of doing a bit of prep, I was like, well, how long is it going to take us? Therefore, how much food you need to carry, and blah blah blah. And I do remember for the listeners' sake, there is the same race is run the weekend before, right? So they lay the course out, and they do two sets. So there's however many people, let's say 35 people run it. They've got a few days off, and then we came in the second crowd. And overall, across the majority of the field, all of our hours were like significantly shorter than the team that did it. Yeah, they did it before. So everybody did a really good job.
That's reassuring. I didn't know that.
Everyone did a really good job. So you should definitely pat yourselves on the back, because
but it was a great experience, wasn't it? And an amazing terrain and environment. I mean, minus 35 it dropped to, didn't it? I think
it's just so beautiful, right? I mean, to go through the forest and across lakes and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, I mean, I was on my own for a lot of the race, so I would stop and I'd literally like hear my heartbeat, and that was it. I mean, like there was nothing. There was no going through a forest, and there's no birds. There's no like twigs snapping. There's no life because it's so cold. Yeah. And that was one of the most bizarre things, was how remote you were, that not even animals were around. I mean, they were there probably under the snow, right? But hibernating, bears and things. But it was amazing. And obviously, as always, it's the people that we meet. You know, having this conversation again. I had great conversations with you and Kate, and you know, the others that we met. It was just it was fantastic. And fortunately, still in touch with so many of the people from that race, which has been amazing.
And I think that, like, that's it, that, you know, these things create an amazing communities, don't they? And opportunities for you to meet like-minded people, and also to meet, you know, there was such a spectrum of people on that race, from really serious athletes who, you know, we met the night before thinking, what are we actually doing here? This is crazy. We haven't got a clue. To people who were like recovering from illness or cancer, or, you know, and were just out there and maybe they didn't complete it, but it didn't matter. They were out there giving it a go. And I just absolutely love that. Tom, tell me about what your typical day looks like, because you strike me as the guy who has, you know, a routine screwed down, and you know, a fair amount of structure and discipline in your life.
So
do you have an average day? Is there such a thing?
I would, I mean, look, it's a bit of a mix. I think it depends if I'm gearing up for a particular race. So I keep a level of fitness. If I'm gearing up for a particular race, and then things get quite specific in terms of training, as you know, like, you know, you have to make sure that you're focused in the right areas for that. But let's avoid that for a second, because that could be anything. I mean, look, generally, I wake up pretty early. I'm up at sort of 5:30, 5:45, depending on what's going on. Go out for a run or do some sort of workout in the morning. Always try and train in the morning, and then the day, the day can be anything. It can be back-to-back meetings until late. It can be meeting clients for lunch. I'm fortunate to be able to kind of control my day to an extent, which is good. But look, making sure that I'm finding balance. One of the things that I've learned over certainly the last few years, after going through, I've been building the business for 12 years now. In my younger years, it was hammer everything. Everything was a nail, just 100 miles an hour, working through every weekend. And that was one of the things that I've really started to try and find a bit more balance with regards to how I approach things. And what I often look at is, it's okay to be in balance in the short term, but balance in the long term. So, if there's a couple of different, let's say, pillars. You've got work, you've got fitness, you've got family, friends, or social, however you want to term that. And those things can be scaled up and scaled back. And so when I'm gearing up towards a specific event, obviously no socials, no going out. I limit time with anybody outside of my wife, and really focus on work and training. When I come back from that, I'm a lot more social. I don't live my life like some sort of a monk. And I think that's probably the biggest. So people look at me and think, okay, well, you must be like super regimented. Everything must be like on an Excel sheet. And I purposely don't do that because
it's not sustainable. You can't. I don't think anyone can live their life like that, really. Yeah.
But there's people I know that do, right? There's people that are so fortunate to be involved in a few different, I would say, areas of life. So people that are, let's say, super successful at work, but all they do is work. I've got some people that are how could you say, like super successful social, but just super social people, but don't care so much about their careers or anything else, but like always great people to be around. And then other people that are, obviously because of what we do, athletes that are super regimented because they're competitive and they live their life absolutely focused on the next event they're doing or the race they're doing. And I try and take a bit from all of these groups and try and kind of mix that up and find some sort of a balance in there, that sometimes I'm like these people, sometimes I'm like these people, and sometimes I'm like these people. If you try and stretch yourself too thin, you're going to break. And I think finding the time to find whatever your escapism is from whatever it is that you want to achieve at, you have to get yourself out of it, reset, and go again. So for me, work is I wouldn't say primary focus, but certainly it's up there. And then the running is just my way of just escaping for 3 or 4 days.
And do you find ways to kind of regulate that, take a step back and almost give yourself a kind of review? Where am I? Am I tipping the balance too far one way? Or do you have good people around you that would indicate that to you? Or
I would say that my wife's pretty good at that. She pulls me out. So sometimes I'm off down a rabbit hole, and I get quite deep down those rabbit holes sometimes. And she will make sure that
she'll pull you out,
connecting with friends and setting up social events and stuff like that, because I've been maybe hammering it at work or hammering it with training and that sort of thing. But also, I would say that because of the extent of the races, and I don't know if you're the same with your challenges, they take so much from you, right? And if you're trying to carve that out of your life, like your training, the lack of social, if you're trying to balance work and that, it takes so much to get that right to be able to perform. To be quite honest, when I finish a race, I'm like, I am done.
I'm done for a while.
I'm done for a while. I just want to go out and see some friends and enjoy my life. And then after a few weeks, I'm like, okay, cool. What's the next event? What's the next thing?
Which I think then heightens your desire to want to go and do the next one at the time that, when it feels right for you. It's a little bit like when you kind of overindulge at Christmas time and or you go through a phase of not really training very well or very hard, and then you're like, okay, now I'm ready.
That's it. You can burn out. You can burn out at that's it. You can burn out at anything, right? You can burn out at focusing on your goals from fitness. You can burn out from partying too much, and you can burn out from work. So it's the same theory behind it. Like if you're going to enjoy it, you need to be in, give your absolute best, and then get out. So this whole micro imbalance or macro balance is the way that I try and look at life. And I plan things at the start of the year in terms of that's the time that I do actually write stuff out. Say, what do I want to achieve this year in all of these different pillars? How am I going to do it? When am I going to do it? And I'll plan. One of the things I want to focus on more as I get a little bit older is spending time with family. So I'll be like, right, well, when can I bring all of the family together to do a full family holiday? So that will be mapped, and then I'll put events around that so they're not crossing over it. So trying to make sure that you can achieve everything over the course of a year, but in any given month, it might look like you're completely obsessed with something and nobody can even have a conversation with you. But if you zoom out and you look at the year, you've achieved everything you wanted to do.
Yeah. And I think often, there's always debate around the perfect, work-life balance, isn't there? Which I always think is a bit of a false dichotomy, because why can't we have work aspects to our lives that we enjoy, that we're not trying to run away from? They don't need to be two distinctly different things that sit at either end of a scale.
Absolutely.
And I think that's, in order to achieve more fulfillment and happiness in your life, it's trying to blur the boundaries of those two things as being distinctly different, and derive pleasure out of what you do for work and derive fulfillment out of what you do in your downtime.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What would you say your career's taught you the most?
Oh, what is my career taught me the most? Firstly, I would say, look, nothing is unsurvivable. When you're building a business, it might look like the worst is happening or about to happen. If COVID taught me anything going into that, when every time my phone rang for a period of time, it was a client either canceling a contract or putting things on pause until they knew what was going on. But meanwhile, at that time, I had 80 odd people working for the business, and I was losing revenue faster than I could pick up the phone. So there was certain things like that have taught me that everything is survivable if you've got a good team. I would also say that the power of when a team is aligned, if you can create alignment with a group of people, it is mind-blowing what can be achieved. And that's something that I've just, even now, when we've got even a bigger team, when I see the alignment across, let's say, our leadership team, and you bring skill sets together of people that are really good at what they do, and far better than I am at 99% of things. I'm very fortunate to be working with people that are very good at what they do, and they pick up the slack of the areas that I'm really not very good at. And when you create alignment with a group of people in that way, it's phenomenal what you can do. It never ceases to amaze me.
How do you invest in them, Tom? I've heard you speak about this on other podcasts. It's an area that I'm very interested in and actively involved in, with keynotes and various sort of coaching and mentorship programs, and the whole area of employee engagement is rapidly growing, isn't it? And rightly so. How do you do you carry over elements of the types of challenges, the things that you've learned through your physical endeavors into the workplace? How do you use those to sort of inspire your culture and your people?
I think that there's, I would hope that there is some inspiration taken from the pragmatic mindset that comes from being able to achieve and to do things in the endurance space. You have to have a very pragmatic mindset, right? You can't go into a race or be in a race and
be
think
chaotic.
Just be chaotic and also just kind of not have a plan. You have to know what you're doing. You have to be prepared. Otherwise, you come unstuck on these adventures, right? So when we're approaching something, let's say approaching something that might be quite difficult, or even if it's just kind of end of year planning and this type of thing. So taking a pragmatic approach into work. I talk a lot about ownership and accountability. Again, that's definitely taken from the world of endurance. You have to take ownership for what it is that you're doing. If you're part of a team, you have to be accountable to that. And I constantly talk about that within the agency, and that's definitely played out with so many people in so many ways. If I see people taking accountability and ownership of a particular client or a project or a piece of work, or wherever it might be, because they know that is the way that if all of us do that, then we all find success. And again, fortunate that quite a lot of the team have been here for quite a period of time, and therefore they've seen the potential in the business from everybody putting together and taking accountability. But in terms of I think when people do take ownership and take accountability, they are automatically more engaged because they feel that this is mine. From a leadership standpoint, it's very important to create the environment, create the space where people can own what it is that they do. they can make decisions for themselves. You give them the leeway to create the environment where it's okay to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And because only then will people actually start to care about it, because they'll feel that it's theirs. And when people feel that it's theirs, then that's when amazing things can happen, because
creativity
it's not,
flourishes, and
yeah, exactly. Creativity flourishes, and you know, and away you go, because people feel that this is my thing. I'm going to do the best that I possibly can, and I'm going to drive this forward, versus I'm going to wait to hear what somebody above me is asking me to do or telling me to do. So we've really removed this kind of autocratic management style, and we have as much as possible an environment where people can put their hands up, can disagree, can have a really healthy debate about everything. And also, and that starts from leadership as well. And I'm sure you talk about this in your keynotes, that you have to, your ego needs to be removed from this environment, and only then will you be successful. And endurance beats ego out of you. It has to, because as we touched on before, if you go in all full of this and all full of that, you come unstuck so many times. You fail so many times.
There's just so much that's
space.
beyond your control, and that's an incredible learning experience.
And that's it. Yeah. So if you remove ego from leadership, and you're humble in leadership, and you say, look, I've got no idea how to deal with this. I don't know how. I don't have the answer to this problem, but I'm pretty sure if we get around the table, there's not a problem that between us we can't figure out. And then you sit down and you be like, that's a great idea. That's a great idea. Here's my 2 cents on this. And all of a sudden you come up with a solution, and everyone feels they own it because they're part of it. They're not just constantly looking to a particular person to give them direction. And it also, that's the truth, right? You have to be honest. No single person.
And vulnerable. I think that is creating a culture in any team, isn't it? Where everyone feels that they can be vulnerable, share their fears, be authentic, therefore, and ask each other for help. And that's how you get through stuff, really, isn't it? Never. What's the saying? You can go, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it is that kind of mentality of, like, working alongside people, but breaking down all those kind of barriers that we often feel like we need to keep up, which is, performance and, not wanting to share our fears and our vulnerabilities. But I think it's a vital part of the process for success.
That's it. People are scared to be vulnerable in front of others. There's all sorts of insecurities that have been protected. And once you break those down and you realize that everybody's got strengths and weaknesses, you're going to be really good at some stuff and you're going to be really bad at some stuff. And everybody around the table is going to have a different mix of the same thing. And once you show that you're okay with that, then they will show they're okay with that. And in a leadership position, you have to instigate that. If there's a culture of fear, there's a culture of finger pointing, then nobody will ever bring their true selves to work. But if you're willing to show how vulnerable you can be in front of others and show what your weaknesses are, then again, that's what I was talking about with alignment before. If you can get to that space with your senior team where everybody's okay with others either making mistakes or saying that I need help because I can't do this bit, it allows you to move so much faster, because the alternative is people are covering up for their weaknesses, potentially making bigger mistakes.
Which is exhausting.
It's exhausting, because everyone's trying to protect themselves and kind of create this armor around them, and then potentially critical of others' mistakes, and that's just a reaction because they feel attacked, and it becomes very toxic very quickly. And this is unfortunately what is corporate culture in many ways. So we've tried to remove that, and all of that definitely comes from the endurance space, and that mindset of just being like, it is what it is. I'm good at this, I'm bad at this. Let's just deal with that and move on. Because if you don't face reality in an ultra, then you're screwed. And if you don't face reality in business over time, you're also screwed.
Yeah, absolutely. Tom, what would you say is and I'm curious to know whether you're going to come back with an answer that's like, career and work related, or whether it's going to be a physical endeavor related response. But what do you feel like your sketchiest moment in life has been? Like when you've really been to the edge?
I would say that there's sort of physically, I would take two things. One is that the UTMB in Oman, going around that mountain after 120k, that was definitely the sketchiest. And the second one, in terms of the mental breaking point, or what I thought was breaking point at the time, was definitely going over that mountain when I was on my own. I was in a bad state by the time I got there. And for the listeners, that was the ice ultra on day 2 or day 3 when we crossed over that mountain. It was something like -30 at the top, and I'd got a bunch of things wrong that really started to unravel, which was my own stupidity. But I hadn't put my outer gloves on my hands.
Yeah.
I hadn't pulled my ski goggles down over my face.
Same.
And I just leant into this, what was a growing blizzard of sorts. It was basically it was just super windy up there. It wasn't necessarily a blizzard, but it was super windy. So it was whipping up all of the snow off the.
And it was a big incline, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a big incline. And again, and this just goes to show how psychology and perspective really, really plays with your mind. Somebody had said in the cabin in the morning when they'd read the map that it was up and down. So as soon as you get up, you're going to start coming down and you're done. And that wasn't the case. So when we got to the top, we walked along that ridge for at least an hour or so. And I lost track of everything because it was so cold, my watch wasn't working. My hands were frozen as claws around my bottles.
Oh my God.
Both bottles I couldn't use. So one was a thermos and one was a squeezy bottle. The squeezy bottle was frozen. I couldn't get in my thermos because my fingers were no longer working and they were frozen solid. So I couldn't. So now I was dehydrating because I wasn't taking any fluids on. I couldn't operate my bag because I couldn't operate any zips. So I couldn't get any food out. So now I'm taking no food, no water. I've been going for a couple of hours now. I'm going up a mountain. I thought I was going up and coming down, but I couldn't. I had no sense of. I lost all sense of kind of a situational awareness because my watch didn't tell me what was going on. I couldn't see the map. I couldn't get a bag. I couldn't get into my bag. So I was just stumbling along and I was losing track of time. And I started to stumble sideways, like I was drunk. I literally felt like I was drunk and slow. And that was the one time in my life where I've been in a race where I've thought, this is how people die.
Yeah. This
just
could
thought to
all
myself,
unravel
like,
very quickly. Yeah. I know, and I mean, I had a very similar experience to that, except for the one critical different factor, which is that I was with Kate. So I can't imagine how you got through that on your own, because I had a very similar situation where I hadn't pulled my goggles down over my eyes early enough. So when I did do that, they were frozen.
They're frozen, right? Yeah. That was
so I had a tiny pinprick that I could see through in one side of the goggles through one eye. And all I could then see were Kate's boots in front of me. And if honestly, if I hadn't have had that, I don't know what direction I would have gone in. Or I'd have had to take them off. And then of course your hands don't work. So you'd have to remove your gloves and you just can't do those things. So similar experience. And I just remember thinking, I have to stay close enough behind Kate that I can see her boots.
Yeah.
And because I also was shouting at her to tell her that I couldn't see a thing. She couldn't hear me.
Yeah, because it's just
so because of the high wind and the storm and the blizzard. And I mean, it was a pretty scary.
It was a tough one. It was a tough one. I remember leaning into that wind with my left eye was closed because I didn't have any goggles on. Yeah. So my eyeball was like freezing.
Oh my God. You can get frozen retina, can't you? I think.
Yeah. So I was thinking about like ridiculous stuff like that. So I had my left eye closed. So I'm walking with one eye, and all I'm trying to see is the poles that we're supposed to be following. But then at certain points when it got particularly bad, I couldn't even see the next one. Yeah. So then I'm looking around behind me. I'm like, have I gone off the path because I can't see anything in front of me because it's all white? Yeah. And I'm stumbling sideways like drunk, and I was just like, this is not a good place to be. So I don't know how long I would have continued before I would have pressed the GPS tracker, which was always in the back of my mind. I was like, when I said that comment earlier, I was like, this is how people die. I didn't think I was going to die because I was like, no matter what happens, I can press this GPS thing, because that was just, I could hit it with my fist or something like that. So I kind of knew that as long as that worked.
People did use them, didn't they? There were people were evacuated from that mountain. Yeah, it was.
A bunch of people dropped out on that mountain. It was, and it was only when my feet started to go down, I realized that now I'm actually coming off this mountain. And I was like, I'm full like tears in my eyes. I was that was my breaking point. I was like, wow, this is why I came here. That was what was in my head. I just kept saying to myself,
I've found new limits.
You came here for that. And I was like, wow, that was it. So I was pretty happy.
What would you say? What's your personal motto in life, Tom? What keeps you on the straight and narrow?
I would say there's two things. One is something I say a lot that's motivated me to to make sure that I'm not making excuses myself. But one is that it's the excuses that you're making today that will be the regrets that you have at the end of your life. And that has stayed with me. That stayed with me for a number of years. I did a TEDx talk quite a few years ago, and did a lot of research for that. And one of the things was understanding Bronnie Ware's work. She's a palliative, or was a palliative care nurse, that wrote a blog that turned into a book. And she said that all the people that she looked after that were in the final stages of their lives, there was 10 things that were coming up almost every single time. People said the same thing. So we're all making the same mistakes through life. And one of the big takeaways, without going through all of them, that's a longer conversation, but one of the main things was that people continually make excuses, and then they get to the end of their life and they're regretting those. So whether they didn't prioritize themselves, or they weren't brave enough to tell people what they actually felt, they didn't spend enough time with like family and friends, whatever those excuses that are always in the moment, quite valid excuses, right? I mean, you've spoken to hundreds of people about signing up for an endurance race or an adventure, right? And there's always, but this, but that, but my job, but this with my family, and those are valid reasons. You can't discount those reasons; they're very valid. But you need to have one strong why. Yeah. Because there are a million no's. There's a million reasons why you can say no, and nobody can really I've got this injury, and yeah, you've got this injury, but we've all been injured. Like, what have you done about the injury? Could you still do the event? You probably could. There are so many ways to unpack things, but it's really easy to make excuses. So that's one thing.
And so, what's your why? What's your purpose?
What's my purpose? My broad brush purpose is that I want to make sure that I leave the world a better place than it was when I arrived. And that plays out for me in many ways. The three key ways are at work. So I want to build a community that everybody looks back on. I want to create value for my family and for those that are closest to me. So whether that be through financial value of building a business and changing the lives of my family and those that come after, so setting them up for a life that's better because I was here, and from a community standpoint, creating an environment that I'm proud of with regards to where people have chosen to work. So they could choose to work anywhere, but if they choose to work here, I want this to be the best possible experience that they've had in their career. And creating that sense of community for me is what gets me out of bed in the morning. And because I've focused on that since day one and really trying to make that the best that it can, everything else is taken care of itself. Yeah. Finance is taken care of itself. Business growth is taken care of itself, because the primary focus has always been the people that work in the business. And then when they're dealing with the client, they're engaged. We talk about ownership and accountability. All those things come from the same thing. So all the things that you need in order to run a larger organization, it all stems from, are people happy? Yep. Is this a safe space? Do they feel valued? So the last one was really simple for me in terms of a motto is do the right thing. Yeah. So we're always faced with so many decisions to make. And there's most of the time I found that internally, which one is the right thing. Yeah.
Trust your instincts.
That's it. When it's easy to do this, especially in business, when you're dealing with people, you're dealing with clients, dealing with careers. There's always something that could, if you were being purely business focused and financial focused, and the decision is clear, but is that the right thing to do in this particular instance? Yeah. And time again, I've made decisions based that are not, like, business wise, it makes no sense. But I know that I'm not here just because I'm trying to drive revenue and drive money and drive profits. I'm here because I want to create an environment, and I want to look back on what I do and be proud of it. And hopefully I want to benefit as many people as we can, which leads into our CSR work and some of the charity stuff we do. I just want to be able to look back, and maybe that's a positive side of ego. Maybe that's when I get to the end of my life, it's the ego inside me that says I wanted to have an impact. Yeah. But what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to use that in a positive way of, let's try and create the most good that you possibly can. And if you're proud of that, then that's a good thing.
I think that's a fairly philanthropic aspect of your personal ego, Tom. I
Well,
think you're allowed. I
I
think you're
hope so.
allowed that.
But I think like, ego plays out
No,
in
but I
positive and
think,
negative,
yeah,
negative
you're
ways.
right. I think you're absolutely right. And it's something that comes up time and time again with the people that I work with in business and, you know, who engage me to go and work in with their workforces, that if you invest in your culture, the commercials will look after themselves.
Absolutely, 100%, because people will believe that
Yeah.
this is that they're looked after, and then they will look after the business, whatever that looks like, whether it's finishing that thing that they were supposed to do, whether it's, you know, being good to a client, whether it's looking after the person that sits next to you, whatever it is. If they feel that the company really cares about them, they will care about the business and the community and the culture. And I don't need anybody to tell me otherwise, because I've seen it with my own eyes over 12 years, the power of it. And I think it's so straightforward that it blows my mind that we're seen as a you know, a different kind of a place to work, and that
That's innovative.
It's mind-boggling for me, because even if you look at what we do from a brutally financial, business orientated lens, if you looked at that and you said, okay, well, if you wanted to drive the most out of a team and a business, and like, it's still the right thing to do, no matter how you look at it. If you've got like your human lens on and say, I want to create an amazing culture, and I want to be proud of how I got to where I got to, and you're fully invested in that, and that's the lens you look at it through, it's the right thing. Pure financials, it's the right thing. So I don't understand how businesses run in other ways, where people are being shouted at, that there's poor cultures, that there's all of the issues we've discussed before about egos at work and power control and politics. It's so,
well,
yeah,
maybe
doesn't
Tom,
work.
maybe more CEOs need to undertake endurance events.
Well, maybe
That's
that's
the
it. Maybe that's
secret
part
ingredient.
of it. Yeah. Maybe it should be mandatory. Maybe the board of directors should be like, if you're the CEO of this company, you need to do at least 2 endurance events a year, because
Exactly.
you need to be humble enough to run the company.
Right.
Maybe
Let's
that's it.
let's set that up, I think.
Brilliant.
What's your Everest, Tom? What have you not done yet in life or in adventure that is on your bucket list?
It would be, for me, I'm still going as far as I can down the trail running route. So on that current path, it would be the UTMB, the big one, 177K around the Mont Blanc Massif. So that's planned in over the next few years. So there's a bit of a there's a process between now and then to get there. So that's definitely it. Outside of that, I would like to move into more kind of, I think, expeditions. Expeditions. So that would be traversing mountain ranges, for example. So no particular racing, but finding routes, going on adventures that people haven't been on. But that will come a little bit later, when I'm not just running, when it's a little bit slower, but you can kind of, you know, you're still going on multi-day adventures.
A hard slog.
It's hard slog, places that people have never been, seeing things that are unique. But before we get there, we've got still a lot more running to do over the next 2 or 3 years.
Amazing.
What's yours?
What's mine? Well, I would also love to get into expeditions at some point. So I've sort of toyed with the idea of actually doing Everest, but the volume of people who do it really puts me off. But I have a really good friend who I'm doing the race across America with next year. Who
I did see you posting about that. That's incredible.
Yeah. Well, so that will be the sort of the next big thing. But ultimately, I would actually really love to do. So Jenny has done a couple of solo skis to the South Pole.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
You know, pulling a pulk, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, I love that hard slog, that just literally putting one foot in front of the other and just keeping on going.
That's
so,
a hard slog. I read a book about that the other day, actually. I just finished oh God, what was it called? It was the two of them were racing, and it was the American guy that won, the younger triathlete, that just basically had a crack at this and then broke the record for doing it. Really amazing story. He burnt himself almost to death on a Thai beach with you know, when they do the fire dancing stuff.
Yeah. Oh my God.
So he basically he got like 3rd-degree burns over a whole portion of his body and was in a coma and all sorts. And he decided whilst he was in a coma in Thailand that he wanted to get into triathlon. And he went and did his first triathlon, and he won like the Chicago triathlon. It was like Chicago Ironman, I think it was, the 70.3, something ridiculous, like his first race ever, and he won it. And then basically became a pro triathlete for a period of time, and then decided that he didn't want to do that anymore, and he wanted to get the world record for the fastest polar crossing. Yeah.
See, how much of that is mindset from having been through an experience like that, a near-death experience like that? I wonder how much of that is just mindset, where you just think, well, this ain't as bad as, you know,
as that was.
As that was. You know, I just think these things fundamentally shift your mindset, don't they?
They do, and I think you need to go backwards before you go forwards. And every success that I've had over time has been from, wow, this is really bad. This is really bad. I need to deal with this. And then what grows out of that has always been vastly more positive than what came before. Whether that's a step back at work and all of a sudden you're like, okay, wow, we lost this big client, let's say, and now, okay, well, now we need to relook at every other account and make those so much better. And all the work we do in solving the problem actually makes the business better. In the fitness side, it's the huge step back that you think that you're not good enough, and all these sorts of negative language comes into your mind, but then you build back from that and you build something that was stronger than it was before. And personal setback, same thing.
Edges.
We all go through, exactly. We all go through personal setbacks, and then you reassess everything and you come back stronger. And, you know, as you said earlier, what was it? 90% of people say that they would never remove an obstacle, but yet every time we get to the obstacle, all you wish for it is to be removed.
To get out of the way. Yeah, exactly.
But, you know, as they say, the obstacle is the way.
Yes. I'm reading the Daily Stoic at the moment.
So
I absolutely love it.
Good.
Love Stoicism. It's a fantastic philosophy. Speaking of philosophies, this podcast is designed to support my new business. We are Intrepid, which is about taking people out of their comfort zones, literally taking them away, preparing them mentally, physically, and then putting them in tough environments, accessible but tough environments where they can, you know, realize that they're more in control of their lives than they think they are, learn and actually be in situations where they're, you know, immersed, rather than just dipping a toe in the water, but they're literally having to, you know, kind of put all of those mental and physical strategies to the test. I think you're a pretty intrepid person, Tom. But what would you say to anyone who is kind of embarking at the start of their journey, that has all the right intentions, but, you know, maybe they are putting barriers in front of themselves, maybe they've got lots of fears or perceived limitations? What advice would you give to people who, you know, they want to do it, they want to get out of their comfort zone, but they just don't know how to take that first step?
It's a very interesting question. I think that a lot of people will put others on a pedestal, and our default thinking, I think all of us are guilty of this, our default thinking is that the other person, whoever that might be that they're looking up to, doesn't feel the same way, doesn't feel the same pain, doesn't feel the same weakness, doesn't have the same fears, doesn't have whatever insecurities that you have, and that because they're built differently, they can do those things, whatever that thing is, whether it's run a marathon, whether it's do an adventure, whatever it is. The truth is that everybody is dealing with the same thing. Now, I've been fortunate enough to come close to many people that have achieved incredible things, and every single one of them is struggling with something. Every single one of them has their own fears, their own self-doubt, their own weakness whilst they're doing the thing, but they find a way through. And you only need to find a way through once to prove to yourself that you can find a way through. And then you realize that I could probably do it a little bit better next time, and a little bit better next time. And then all of a sudden you're on chapter 15, but
I love it.
the person that's on chapter 1 is looking at your chapter 15 and thinking you were born that way. And the truth is, you're not born that way. Everybody hates getting up on stage. I don't know many people that started, certainly how they started out. Nobody started walking onto a stage in front of 50 or 200 people and thought, this is really cool. I feel totally at ease here and I don't have a problem. everybody was panicking when they walked onto that stage, thinking everyone's going to laugh at me. I want to forget all my words. I look like an idiot. What will they think of me? All of those things. And it's a really good example of what plays out in the endurance space as well, is that each time you do it, you realize you're not as bad as you thought you were. You didn't forget all of your things. You made a couple of mistakes, but mostly people were on your side and you got through it. And then you do it the second time, third time, fourth time. And then everyone says, oh, you're a natural at this. Whether it be, oh, you're naturally a runner. Sometimes I'm 3Ks in and I'm stopping because I'm blowing and I've done 3K, but then someone will tell me, I ran across the beach today. I can't possibly think how you ran 250K in the sand. It's like, if I ran across the beach, I'd probably be out of breath just like you.
Yeah.
But you stop, you go again. You stop, you go again. You stop, you go again. So it's building up this level of self-talk that it's tolerance, and the only way that you're going to get to where you want to be is just by starting. And only then will you prove to yourself that you can actually do the thing that you're scared of. You might not do it perfectly, but you'll get there. And then you just keep chipping away.
Love it. That's fantastic. Tom, there has to be something about you that isn't, on point, perfect, carefully.
There's many things.
What are your worst habits?
There's many things. I've got many worst habits and many areas that I wish I was better at. I'll give you a couple I'll give you a couple. So one, from a standpoint of, if I look back, one of the things that I could have done a lot better is be a better friend to people at certain times. I've been too hyper-focused on goals and building a business and not showing up when I've needed to show up. And I would say that's, when I look back, I'd be like, I could have done better there. I could have done better there. I could have been more available for this person. And that's something over the last, I'm 40 now. I'd say certainly over the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've really tried to focus on. But I would say any earlier than that, I was so focused on building the business that I would just be like, I don't need to go to this event. I don't need to show up at that party. And it was all in my own head. It was just about, because I had such a clear mission and I felt that other people didn't have the same mission, it gave me the license to just behave as I wanted to, in terms of, if it takes me away from what my goal is, I'm not doing it, full stop. And I look back and think, maybe that's a good thing, because I think I'm overcorrecting now. So I'm trying to be, as much as I can do with life, is to be a better friend to people and be more available to people if they need it.
I think that goes back as well to your point earlier about balance and imbalance in sort of macro and micro aspects of your life.
Yeah.
Like, you're not always going to get it right, but it's that what's important is the element of self-reflection. And I am 100% sure that every single one of those friends has forgiven you, and probably didn't even notice or take offense in any way. But
I hope so. I hope so. I think the other side, in terms of what I would like to be better, I definitely take on. I definitely take on or instigate more things than I should, and don't always follow them.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, I've launched entire departments in this business that have just failed miserably. So I failed over and over and over again. But I think as long as you've got the right intent and people can see, okay, there's logic to doing X, Y, or Z. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. You can't control all the variables. But yeah, I know that I work with people that are a lot more, and this is purposeful, but I work with people that are a lot more regimented than I am. So I know that I frustrate the hell out of them when I'm like off in this direction. I've got this new idea and then we're off in this direction. So I think I could probably try and be a little bit more balanced and understand that if I'm asking people to run down this path with me, that I should probably have a few more things figured out before I send the troops down there.
I'm sure they trust you. Tell me, what's a recent compliment that you've received?
A recent compliment that I received, I would say, ties back in with a few things we've touched on. It would be, they might listen to this, so I won't say names, but a recent person that joined the business from that came from big corporate world and big job, big company, very well known business, and came in and was very much how do I explain what, I can't remember exactly what the wording was, but basically this particular person was very surprised with how I made decisions around certain topics, not being business focused or financially focused, when she's like, you're literally going to lose money doing that. But it was the right thing to do. So I think that thing, it was the confirmation, reaffirmation. I can't get the right word, but just I suppose someone coming in from a third party that I respect as a company, but coming in and saying, you're doing things very differently here, but it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, well, I guess that's
validation.
sort of like,
that's the word I'm looking
it's
for.
an external validation, isn't it, from someone who doesn't know you necessarily.
Yeah.
It's pretty unbiased to tell you that you're living by your personal motto of do the right thing. That's
which was nice, because I think it's that's
you're on
how we
track.
want to run. That's how we want to run things. Yeah, I think that was it. And I'll flip that question to you. I like that question.
What's my
a recent compliment that someone gave you? You can't just ask all the difficult questions, you see.
Well, we'll have to do a reciprocal podcast at some point.
We will. I'm actually launching something soon. I was going to talk to you about that.
Amazing. Oh well, I'll sign up.
It's a new one.
I don't even need to know what it is. I'm up for that.
Appreciate it.
Probably that when the chips are down, when I'm in a hard place, is when I push through and get the job done.
Nice.
Yeah, there can be all sorts of stuff going on around me, and I'll sort of be able to regain my focus and get through what I need to get through before I then fall apart.
As long as you get through what you need to get through, we all fall apart sometimes. It's absolutely okay.
Yeah.
But
Tom, my last question, and maybe this is something that we'll pick up on at a later date, and when we do that reciprocal thing, is there anything that you wish I'd asked you? What we didn't talk about that we could talk about next time?
What haven't we spoken about? No, I think, to be honest, this has been wide ranging. I think you've really pulled it together in terms of the different areas of life and lessons. I think maybe talking about some of the corporate stuff. I think we've got there's a lot of common ground there. So what are you going in and saying to the corporates? How does I've done a talk recently to the leadership at Nissan about resilience, and I use some of the stories that we've touched on, certainly the ICE Ultra and MDS and a few other bits, kind of weave into a narrative that's, I hope, quite engaging for them to kind of really drive home the story of resilience, and how that then shows up in performance, and how resilience allows you to be more balanced in decision making, how we make 35,000 decisions a day. So therefore, if we can improve even percentage points of that, the compounded effect of more effective decisions allows us to lead a better life. Exactly.
I'm increasingly fascinated by that whole area, actually, and it's I find it, I don't know about you, but hugely reassuring that, I actually had an inquiry in recently, in fact yesterday, for a keynote for a employee engagement agency who want me to go and do a talk for their agency, but their whole business is about consulting and advising other businesses on how to do employee engagement. So now there are not only departments for employee wellness and engagement, but there are agencies as well that are set up to deliver that to others. So I find all of that so fascinating and hugely reassuring that, in the world that we live in, when there seems to be so much wrong with it, there is still clear evidence that people are looking after each other and genuinely investing in people, in happiness and people's lives, and I see that very clearly from what you do, Tom, at Create. So it's been an absolute pleasure to catch up. I feel like we could keep chatting forever, but I'm very sure we've got stuff to do, and I think my facial muscles need a bit of a rest, and perhaps yours too. It was such a great chat. Thank you so much for coming on. And let's do it again soon.
I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed spending time together in the Arctic, and all the fun that was, and yeah, it's been a real pleasure to chat, and I've been really enjoying following your content and everything that you're doing. I think Intrepid is a great idea. You know, I think we're living proof of how going out into the wilderness and having these adventures can really change your mindset, can change the way that you look at the world, and can just be a really positive force. So if you can share that with people, if you can spread that message, and if you can get more people to experience it through Intrepid, I think that's what an incredible way to
I'm on
be
it.
and to live.
I'm on it. That's what we're doing right here, Tom.
Good. If I can
Thank
help
you
you, I
so
certainly
much.
will in any way. Thanks a
I
lot.
love that.
The Pin Drop podcast brings you the most intrepid chat on the podsphere. Interesting people sharing their personal formula for success, stories of personal growth, people confessing their fears and what they have learned from going to the edge. Hosted by me, Vicki Tom, founder of We Are Intrepid. We Are Intrepid is a personal growth philosophy and an adventure experience company. Our sole purpose is to show you how to experience the truly life-enhancing effects of advantage through adversity, to understand how our fears and emotions work, and how to unlock the huge potential we all have to lead a more fulfilling and rewarding life. And maybe for you, that starts with listening to this.